Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina mursaleen. Amma ba'd. As you can see, and as we have advertised, our Shaykh, our beloved Shaykh Jasim Al-Ainati has come all the way from Kuwait, and we thank him, after thanking Allah, for agreeing to come to Masjid Taiba to deliver a lecture. I believe this is his first time here, and he is going to deliver a lecture talking about a goodly life. We're all seeking improvement in our life and having goodly life, and irrespective of what age and gender, we all want to have a good life. So the Shaykh, alhamdulillah, is going to deliver a lecture on this topic. For it, the Shaykh.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
The Shaykh began by praising Allah and beginning with the Khutbah al-Hajah. I'm sure it's known to most of us, in which we seek Allah's forgiveness and seek Allah's protection from the evilness of ourselves and our actions. And the Shaykh declared, as it comes in the Khutbah al-Hajah, that whoever Allah guides, none can misguide, and whoever Allah misguides, none can guide. And we bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his slave and his messenger.
الحياة الطيبة هي الحياة التي يشعر فيها الإنسان بالطمأنينة والراحة النفسية، وكذلك إذا وقعت له مصائب أو ابتلاء من الله عز وجل فإن له طريقة يستطيع أن يرجع فيها لحل هذه المشاكل والبلايا.
The Shaykh said a good life, which is a life where a person feels tranquility, where a life, it's the only speaker that we've got, is the life where a person feels tranquility and a person has comfort. And a good life, like the Shaykh is saying here, Hafidhullah, is that if a person has something that bad happens to him in his life, if he is tested by Allah, he has a way and an ability to go back and find a solution to that problem.
وهذا يحتاج إلى العلم والإيمان، ولذلك الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول لنبيه الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم: فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله واستغفر لذنبك.
The Shaykh said, this, in order for you to have a goodly life and have those things that the Shaykh has just mentioned, we need to have ilm, we need to have religious knowledge, and we need to have iman, and we have firmness in our faith. And this is because Allah instructs and commands the Prophet ﷺ, where Allah says, know and have knowledge of La ilaha illallah, and then seek forgiveness for your sins and for the sins of the believers.
اليوم هناك حرب شديدة على الإيمان بالله عز وجل. أصبح هناك من هم أعداء لدين الله عز وجل يشككون المسلم في وجود الله وأنه خالقه وموجده.
The Shaykh said, today we are undergoing a warfare on our iman, and this warfare is very intense. And this is because the enemies of the religion are trying to spread confusion about our belief and our iman, to the extent where they are trying to say, does God really exist? The existence of God is also being questioned.
ولو أن المسلمين اليوم تعمقوا في كتاب ربهم وفي اتباع هدي نبيهم صلى الله عليه وسلم لوجدوا الإجابات واضحة يستطيعون بها يدفعون شر شبه هؤلاء الملحدين والضالين.
The Shaykh said, if Muslims today engage themselves deeply in the Book of Allah and Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, they will find a very clear answer to any kind of doubt that these people who are trying to create confusion, atheists, etc., are trying to bring. Therefore, that person will then be able to have an answer for it in himself.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala في آيتين يرد على شبه الملحدين والضالين، وسنتكلم بشيء من التفصيل ما نسميه بالمنطقي والعقلي الذي يوافق الواقع ويخالف كلام هؤلاء الملاحدة والضالين.
The Shaykh is saying here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the atheists and the misguided people who follow those different sects in two separate ayat in a clear manner in responding to the doubts and the confusion that they bring. And the Shaykh said that in these two ayat we're going to focus on them in detail, and the Shaykh is going to give us an intellectual understanding behind them, so that we can understand the reality of what they are saying, so that we'll be able to have an answer for what confusions they bring.
يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى أم خلقوا من غير شيء أم هم الخالقون أم خلقوا السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون. وفي هذا رد على مدعي أن الوجود جاء بالصدفة، ورد على من ادعى بأن ليس هناك إله إنما هي قوة الطبيعة. هذه الآيتين ترد عليهما بكل بساطة، ولكن كذلك نحتاج إلى نوع من التفصيل في بيان بطلان هذه الأقوال الضالة والمنحرفة.
The Shaykh said Allah says in the Quran, in these two ayat, did they create themselves? Were they created from nothing? Or did they create themselves? Then the second ayah, or are they the ones who created in the heavens and the earth? Rather, they are people who have no certainty. These are the two ayat the Shaykh is saying that we are going to focus on in detail, because this refutes the idea that we have come about by coincidence, and it refutes the idea that it is Mother Nature and the strength of nature has created the creation and everything that is inside of it. So the Shaykh is saying these two ayat are very prudent and very straight to the point and is easy, but this needs us to look into it in further detail to understand why what they say is completely incorrect and false.
أول نقطة، هؤلاء يأتون بكلام ولا يعرفون حقيقته، بمعنى أنهم يأتونك بكلام لا تفسير له. فعندما يقول تشارلز داروين نحن تكوننا أو خلقنا من صدفة عمياء.
The Shaykh said the first point that we want to focus on is that they have a theory and a belief and a statement which they don't really have a reality or practicality to it. What this means is that they are saying something and they have a belief which doesn't really have any kind of substance behind it. So the Shaykh is saying, for example, Charles Darwin, he said, and his idea and his belief is that we were made or that we were created from a blind coincidence.
نقول أول شيء يعني حتى التعبير وتسمية الصدفة بالعمياء كلام باطل وكلام ليس بالعلم أصلا، بدليل أن الواقع الذي نعيش فيه إذا كان هناك إنسان أعمى لا يرى، هل ممكن هذا الإنسان الأعمى يصنع لنا سيارة؟ نقول مستحيل. فكيف بصدفة عمياء تصنع الوجود كله؟ هذا مستحيل مستحيل المستحيل.
Sorry. The Shaykh said in response to this belief of we were being created from a blind confusion, the Shaykh said even the wording blind confusion, that doesn't make any sense. And it is false from its foundation because it is not based on knowledge. And the Shaykh said the evidence for that and the way that we can understand that is if we look at our own reality. If there is a person who is blind, he cannot see anything, is it possible for us to say that this person can manufacture for us a car, a very nice, beautiful car? We will say that is impossible. So then the Shaykh is saying, how is it possible that we have come about from a confusion which is, or a coincidence should I say, a coincidence which is blind, that has created the whole world and everything in it?
ونأتي نقول له إذا كنت إنسان عالم حقيقة وتدعي أنك إنسان باحث في أحياء الموجودة فلا بد أنك تعرف لنا ما معنى الصدفة كما يعرف الإنسان حقيقة الماء. الماء ما هو؟ سائل شفاف لا لون له ولا طعم ولا رائحة، صفات الماء، ويتجمد عند 0 سنتيغريد ويتبخر عند 100 سنتيغريد ويتشكل بشكل الإناء الذي يوضع فيه سواء كان بطن أو كأس أو أي يتشكل فيه. إذا أنا أعطيت صفات وملامح نستطيع بها نعرف الماء. إذا جئنا بكأس شاي وقلنا للإنسان بعدما عرفناه الماء قلنا له عن الشاي قلنا له هذا ماء فيقول لا، يرفض ويقول لا أنتم عرفتوني الماء بأنه شفاف وليس له طعم ولا رائحة، هذا لونه يعني أحمر أو بني أو أسود تسمي كما تشاء اللون وله طعم وله رائحة، إذا هذا ليس ماء. ما هذا؟ نقول له صح، أنت كلامك صح، أنت عندك معلومات وخلفية عن حقيقة الماء، فإذا هذا نقول لك الآن شاي. أنت إذا أصبحت تميز بين الأشياء وتفهمها لأن عندك معلومة عن الأمر الذي وصفناك إياه به الماء.
The Shaykh continued to say, we will say to this person who is claiming about this blind coincidence, we will say that if you are a researcher and if you are a scholar about nature, etc., and you engage in the life of environment and nature and reality, etc., then what we would ask from you is a definition as to what you mean by coincidence. What does coincidence mean? Because now you're using terminologies which to us we don't agree with. So we need a definition on what coincidence is. So the Shaykh has given an example of water, for example. He's asking us, what is water? What is the definition of water? So the Shaykh picked up the bottle and he described what water is. It's a liquid, it's transparent, it doesn't have a smell, it doesn't have a taste, it freezes at 0 degrees, it boils at 100 degrees, and it takes the shape, it has no shape, it takes the shape of the utensil that it is in. Because of the characteristics and the definition of what water is, we now know what water is. So now if a person comes with a cup of tea and somebody says, this is some water, you will be able to say, no, this is not water. It resembles water, maybe it's made out of water, but it's not water. Why? Because it's not the same color. It's the same liquid, but it's got a taste now. It's got a different color, maybe it's red, maybe it's brown. It's a different temperature perhaps. So the Shaykh is saying now, you will ask, what is this then? You want a new definition of something that has come to you, because now you have a background on what water was initially. So the Shaykh is saying, when you have knowledge and definitions and characteristics of something, you are able to decipher between two things very easily.
الآن نسأل تشارلز داروين ومن ماشى ووافق بأفكاره نقول له ما هي الصدفة؟ عرف لنا الصدفة. فيقول هو شيء حدث هكذا. نقول لا، هذا تعريف قاصر. نحن سنعرف لك الصدفة ونبين لك أنت حتى لا تعلم حقيقة الصدفة ولا تفهم الصدفة على وجه الحقيقة. فيقول ما هي الصدفة؟ عرف لي الصدفة. نقول له هو حدث مفاجئ لم يسبق له ترتيب ولم يقع بعد وقوعه منه نظام ولا ترتيب. هو شيء حدث فجأة، يعني بدون ترتيب معين، وهذا واقع سنأتيكم بالمثال. ولم يحدث بعد وقوعه نظام ولا ترتيب، ما في بعض النظام ولا ترتيب. مثال قال هات مثال يا شيخ. طيب احنا دائما يعني تكون أحداث بعض الصدف تقع للناس، بعض الصدف. مثال على ذلك لو أن عندك صديق درست معه في الثانوية وبعد 30 سنة رأيته في السوبر ماركت، أنت تعرف شكله وتعرف اسمه، تيجي تسلم عليه السلام عليكم الأخ محمد، نعم، فتقول ماذا؟ صدفة جميلة رأيناك، صدفة جميلة. هو ذا قال صدفة عمياء ونحن نقول صدفة جميلة. لماذا؟ لأنه فرحان برؤية صاحبه. هل هناك ترتيب قبل هذا اللقاء؟ هل في موعد؟ هل في اتصال؟ هل في أحد أخبرك بأن هذا سيذهب إلى السوبر ماركت فأنت ذهبت عشان تلقاه؟ ليس هناك ترتيب سابق. إذن حدث فجأة، حدث فجأة. وهل تتوقع أنك بعد رؤياك في هذا السوبر ماركت أنك كلما دخلت السوبر ماركت ستراه؟ لا. الجواب لا، بل مستحيل أنك كلما دخلت السوبر ماركت ستجد صاحبك محمد موجود في السوبر ماركت. الحدث هذا مع فيكم أنتم ما حدث، ولا احنا سمعنا حتى عن العالم واحد كلما دخل بدون موعد إلى دكانه أو إلى دكان رأى صديقه القديم في كل لقاء. إذن ليس هناك وراءها ترتيب ولا نظام. متفقين؟ قال متفقين. طيب نأتي الآن، أين تأثير الصدفة علينا في حياتنا؟ نحن نعيش بالصدف أو نعيش في نظام؟ قال أنت تعيش في أنظمة متداخلة.
صحيح. لا والله شر واحد. الله يبارك فيك يا شيخ. The Shaykh is saying now the next point is the question that we can ask to Charles Darwin and those people who believe in that theory. What is coincidence? Because this is the thing that we want from them, a definition. What is coincidence? They will say in their answer something that happens just like that. We will say that is not a definition, because that is not a holistic definition. We don't in our reality know of things that happen just like that, and we accept that. So a possible definition that they give to what they mean by blind coincidence is that something that happened all of a sudden, out of surprise, an event that occurred, and there's no order to it before, and there is no order to it after. Something that happened by surprise, it just happened, nobody ordered it to happen, it just coincidentally came about, and even afterwards there is no continuing order or law or physics or anything that continues afterwards. And the Shaykh gives an example of a coincidence that we have in our reality, but we cannot apply that to what they are saying. So he's saying, for example, I have a friend that I used to know in secondary school more than 30 years ago. I haven't seen him for a very long time. When I went to the supermarket, I saw him from far away. I know what he looks like, I know his name. So when I went over to him, I gave him salam, and I said, "Oh, you Muhammad, I haven't seen you in a long time." This is because I know who he is, and I know his name. The Shaykh said that this is a coincidence. This is a nice coincidence. This is a coincidence, because we became happy. Now, this fits in with the definition of what they are saying. Why? Is because there is no order before it. There was no appointment that we were going to meet at that supermarket at that time. There was no meeting place, there was no phone call, there was no interaction. We just went there and we coincidentally met one another. The Shaykh said that this, in our reality, would we say that this is a coincidence that happened? Would we say that after this event, every time you go to the supermarket, you will experience the same thing again? Every time you go to the supermarket, the Shaykh goes to the supermarket, does he expect to see his friend in the same way what happened that time, which happened by coincidence? The Shaykh said, no, nobody will say that. That is absolutely impossible. And there's no one in the world, as a theory, would agree that the same thing happens coincidentally again and again with an order. So the Shaykh is saying, do you agree that this is what we mean by coincidence? And they will be compelled to believe and agree with this. So now we ask them, what is the reality? Do we live in a world of coincidence where there is no order before and there is no order afterwards? Or does things happen because of an order?
وهذه أمثلة كثير في حياتنا أن الصدفة تقع في حياتنا في أشياء نادرة وقليلة، لكن نحن نعيش في أنظمة متداخلة. أنت يا ابن آدم مخلوق منظم. كيف أنا مخلوق منظم؟ إيه نعم. أنت تمشي على ماذا؟ على رجليك ولا على يديك؟ تمشي على رجلين. طيب هل حدث صدفة يوم من الأيام وأنت استيقظت من النوم وأردت أن تسير على رجليك، ولكن حدثت فجأة مشكلة فانقلبت وسرت على يديك؟ حدث هذا؟ ما حدث. والله يضحكون، لأن هذا الشيء ما يحدث أبدا. ولا سمعنا حتى الذين يلعبون في السيرك والجمباز، يعني يسير مسافة قصيرة لكن هو بإرادته قلب نفسه، وليست جاءت فجأة وقلبته أبدا. إذن هذه الصدفة صعبة الوقوع في حياتنا، وإن وقعت فهي نادرة وقليلة. أليس كذلك؟
Sorry, the Shaykh said that there are many examples of coincidences that happen in our lives and possible ways of them happening, but they are very, very few. Coincidences that happen in our life are very, very few. The reason why is because we live in a world full of order. He said, the Shaykh, Hafidhullah, that man is created in order. And he gave an example. We walk on our feet and we don't walk on our hands. That is because we have that order. Is it possible that a person coincidentally wakes up one morning and he wants to walk on his legs, but all of a sudden he's turned upside down and he starts walking on his hands? Is that possible? Has anybody heard any kind of a coincidence like that happening? That is because, and the Shaykh said, even those people who play or involved with gymnastics and sports, etc., if a person wants to walk on his hands, he will do it on purpose. He will train himself and he will follow the laws and the order in order for him to accomplish it. Nobody will say that a person will leave the order that he lives his life in by coincidence.
لكن القضية ثانية مهمة عشان نكسر هذا الكلام وهذه النظريات الوهمية الباطلة التي لا حقيقة لها. نقول الإنسان صنع السيارة، صح؟ ولا السيارة خرجت كذا صدفة؟ لا، الإنسان صنع السيارة. طيب هذا الإنسان عندما صنع السيارة، عندما يصنع السيارة، هل هي تسير لوحدها أم هو الذي يسيرها ويحركها؟ هو الذي يسيرها ويحركها. يعني هو عنده التحكم فيها، control. You have the control of his mate. هو اللي صنعها، هو يسيطر عليها ويحركها. طيب نسأل سؤال بسيط. هل الصدفة تتحكم فينا؟ إذا كانت هي أوجدتنا أو إحنا وجدنا من الصدفة، هل الصدفة تتحكم فينا؟ ولا نحن عندنا ترتيبات، ونحن لا نعيش مع الصدفة وليس لها سيطرة كبيرة علينا. نعم هي تحدث بعض الأحيان ولكن ليست لها سيطرة علينا. ولا تصور لو كانت صدفة تسيطر عليك ما تستطيع تعيش. ما تستطيع تعيش. كيف ما أستطيع أعيش؟ الآن نحن في أي مدينة؟ في ليستر، صح؟ طيب أنت تنام الليلة وتستيقظ وإذا أنت في ليفربول. صدفة أنت في ليفربول. طيب أنا لا أعرف ليفربول ولا أعرف شوارع ليفربول وعملي في ليستر. كيف أرجع إلى ليستر مرة ثانية؟ مشكلة. طيب وأنت هذه المشكلة يعني بصعوبة حليتها ورجعت إلى ليستر. نمت مرة ثانية في ليستر. اليوم الثاني نمت استيقظت ولا أنت في مانشستر. يا جماعة الصدفة هذه تعبتني والله. أنا برجع ليستر موقعي لا أعرف من عملي. وكل ليلة أنت تنتقل من ليستر إلى لندن، من لندن إلى بالموث، من بالموث الصدفة هذه لعبت فيك لعب. تلعب فيك وتنقل. هل تستطيع تعيش؟ لا، صعب العيش. ما تستطيع تعيش ولا تستقر لأن هكذا تعيش في دوامة وفي تعب، صح ولا لا؟ إذا الصدفة ما تجعل لك حياة طيبة.
The Shaykh continued by going on to his second point, where he was saying that the reason why we're talking about this in detail because it needs clarification in order for us to address all of their points and discuss their doubts, because in actual fact their theories and their beliefs have no real reality to them. So the Shaykh said, for example, man created car. Was this done by coincidence? Did the car come about by coincidence? Nobody will say it came about by coincidence. The second point now, to elaborate this further, when man created the car, does the car drive by itself? The answer is clearly no. It needs a driver, it needs someone to control, because we need to have an order after we have created that thing. So the Shaykh now, elaborating this further, is asking the question, if we were created by coincidence, what is it that controls our lives? What is the order in our lives? Is it that coincidence every single day plays a role in the way we live our lives? The answer is clearly no, because we need to have order in our life in order for us to function. If we didn't have order, we will not be able to live in a world full of coincidence. The Shaykh said, yes, we have to say again, coincidences do happen. They are few though, but they do happen. But they do not control the way we live our lives, because our lives, majority of it, is based on order. So the Shaykh is saying here, if we lived a life where there was no order and a life was just full of coincidence, from the way that we were created to the way that we will live, we will not be able to exist. The Shaykh gives an example. Right now you live in Leicester. If you go to sleep tonight, coincidentally you wake up all of a sudden without any order, you wake up in Liverpool. What would you do? You don't know Liverpool, you don't know your way around Liverpool, you work in Leicester, you will now think of a way of how to get back to Leicester to carry on your life. That is because we live in a life of order, and we don't live in a life of coincidence. And that doesn't happen. Nobody wakes up in a different city all of a sudden. But the Shaykh says, let's even elaborate that even further. Even if he went back to Leicester, and then he went to sleep again, and then coincidentally he woke up the next night in Manchester. The Shaykh says, now you can see why the idea of blind confusion creates a lot of hardship. Imagine every single night you are being moved from one place to another, London, Bournemouth, etc. You're completely no order in your life. How would you be able to live? Your life would have no stability. Your life would be a life of vacuum and hardship. You'll just be constantly moving, and this is not a good life.
إذن هذا الكلام غير معقول ولا منطقي في العقل السليم وغير واقعي. طيب نأتي لقضية مهمة، وهي هل كل عقل في الإنسان، يعني كل الناس عقولهم متساوية؟ لا، عقولهم غير متساوية. ونقول كذلك هناك ما يسمى بالخيال في الفكر الإنساني، والفكر الإنساني فيه ما يسمى بالخيال الممكن الوقوع، وفي الفكر الإنساني الخيال المستحيل الوقوع. وسأعطيكم أمثلة.
Sorry. The Shaykh said, therefore, this statement and this belief of blind coincidence is not a belief or a theory or an idea which has any kind of substance behind it. It's not in line with intelligence, it's not in line with any research, it's not in line with any even philosophical argument, and it's not in line with the reality of the world that we live in. The Shaykh says, now we come to a very important point. The question the Shaykh is asking, are all humans the same when it comes to their level of intellect? The answer is clearly no. And the Shaykh is saying, to elaborate that further now, is that the human mind is able to understand things in different ways, and the human mind is able to imagine things in different ways. And when it comes to the human imagination, the Shaykh is going into a bit more philosophical and more technical now, is of two types. Something which is known as mumkin al-wuqu', something which is possible that it can happen, and something which is known as al-mustahil al-wuqu', which is impossible that it will happen. So your human mind can comprehend and imagine things that is possible that it can happen, but then your human mind can also think of things that you will know, you're able to imagine it, but you will know that this is impossible.
مثال على الخيال الممكن الوقوع في الفكر الإنساني تليفون كان من الخيال البسيط في أول أمره علبتين وخيط بسيط، واحد يمسك هنا ويمسك هنا وهذا يصيح هنا مع شد الخيط، فأصبح يسمع كلام تردد في ضربات علبة الروب، يسمع الصوت أقوى من لو كان يكلمه هكذا في الهواء. قال ممكن نعمل جهاز أو وسيلة يتصل بعضنا ببعض من بعيد بسلك. ثم اكتشف الإنسان أن هناك أسلاك معدنية ممكن توصل الحرارة والكهرباء وكذلك الصوت باكتشاف السماعة، فصار هناك تليفون أرضي بالأسلاك. ولو أنكم كنتم قبل تقريبا 60 سنة أو 50 سنة موجودون، ممكن بعضكم الأسلاك حق التليفونات في لندن موجودة الأعمدة وأسلاك كثيرة مشبكة شغلة الآن صارت تحت الأرض. فالإنسان بدأ يتطور عنده هذا الأمر. لكن هؤلاء الناس في الأول هل فكروا أن التليفون الذي كان بالأسلاك وبالخيوط سيصبح مثل هذا الجهاز الذي ممكن علبة صغيرة ممكن أن تضع فيه مكتبة ب100,000 كتاب؟ ما تخيلهم هذا، لكن حدث فوق خيالهم. فإذا هناك ممكن أن يقع بعض ما يتخيل الإنسان ويصبح ممكنا ويفوق حتى خياله الذي توقعه.
The Shaykh has given an example of something which is mumkin al-wuqu', something which is possible that is going to happen. And he gives the example of the phone. And he said before they didn't have the phone, then they began to experiment with two devices, maybe a cup on each side with some string in between. And they discovered that, your voice can then be transferred from one cup to the other so the person can hear you with the vibrations traveling through the string. Then they expanded that further and they thought, there's another way that we can make that communication even further. And they strengthened the communication, they strengthened the wires, etc. And they looked at how they can provide electricity with pylons, etc. So we can do the same thing with with phones. So the Shaykh is saying, if you go back 50, 60 years, if you go to places like London, etc., you will find large pylons high in the sky with lots of string on them. That is because so many people are having, phone lines and electricity, etc., and then that goes underneath that. The Shaykh is saying now, this is something which is common knowledge for us all, but do the first people, the people who just, in the beginning of mobile phones, in the beginning of the invention of the phone, did they ever think, if you were to say to them that one day there's going to be a smartphone which is going to be wireless, it's going to be considerably smaller than the gadgets that they had at that time, you can even have 100,000 or 100 books in there, or 100,000 books in there, you can download apps, etc. Do you think that they'll be able to say, yes, this is possible? But now the Shaykh is saying, this is possible, they could have said, yeah, but now something even further than what they have imagined has actually occurred.
وهناك خيال تخيله أناس قبل 60 سنة كذلك تقريبا، ولكنه مستحيل أن يقع ولم يقع. مثل ماذا؟ سوبرمان. تعرف سوبرمان؟ سوبرمان موجود، ليس موجود سوبرمان، لكن في الخيال موجود. نعم، الكتب كنا صغار مثل الشباب كنا يعطونا كتب كذا سوبرمان، ويعني الرجل وطواط وسبايدر مان، يعني كتب كذا خيالات فيها خيالات. احنا نقرأ سوبرمان، أتمنى أن أكون سوبرمان أنا. لكن هل حدث الآن بعد التطور التكنولوجي أن خرج لنا سوبرمان؟ ما في سوبرمان أبدا، كله خيال. لكن إيش الخيال هذا؟ نقول خيال وهم، يعني ليس له حقيقة ومستحيل الوقوع. شفت إنسان يطير في الهواء بدون أي مساعدة؟ ما في. شفت إنسان يحمل قاطرة كاملة وينقلها من مكان إلى مكان؟ ما في. هل رأيت إنسان يخرج من عينه نار فتحرق الذي أمامه؟ ما في. إذن هذا نسميه خيال الأوهام، أي التي لا حقيقة لها ومستحيل أن تقع. وهذا نفس وهم الذي أصاب تشارلز داروين، فتوهم هذا الغبي بأن توهم أننا وجدنا بلا خالق.
The Shaykh is saying the second type of al-wughu, or something that can come about, is the one which is impossible. The second type of imagination is the one that is impossible. So the Shaykh said, even if you go back 50, 60 years, we just talked about phones. If you go back again 50, 60 years, there's something which is part of the imagination, but we are all in total agreement that this thing is impossible. And the Shaykh gave the example of Superman. We all know who Superman is. He's here, but at the same time he's not here. He's here in our understanding of our imagination, but we also agree that this thing is impossible. It can never come about, and it remains in our imagination. And this, the Shaykh said, they used to give us comics, and we used to read them, and he goes, I used to be fascinated. But even after all of the technology, you will never find a man who is able to fly by himself, according to his own ability. Or that he's able to be so strong, he can pick up a train and put it in another place. Or that fire can come out of his eyes and he can heat things up. The Shaykh said, no matter how advanced we can become, we will always remember and realize that this thing is from the imagination, which is impossible to ever occur. And the Shaykh is now saying here that this is the same thing that Darwin has fallen into. He's talking about theories, he's talking about a belief which is impossible for it to occur.
طبعا نظرية داروين إذا أخرجناها من التفكير السليم وعقول العاقلين سيأتيك آخر بشبهة أخرى فيقول لك نحن خلقنا من قوة الطبيعة، وهذا الشياطين ما ينتهون من فكرة إلى فكرة، كما قال عز وجل وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا شياطين الإنس والجن يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا. ناس عندهم يعني أفكار شيطانية إبليسية، تسميها الفلسفة الإبليسية في الشيطنة لإضلال الإنسان.
Sorry. The Shaykh said that this is Darwin, but from that same understanding and that school of thought and that theory and that way of thinking, there's another idea which has been created, which is that they believe that Mother Nature is the creator of the creation. Nature has created itself, or whatever they call it, Mother Nature, etc. And the Shaykh saying that these are two people who are agreeing with each other. They're coming from the same ideology, the same ideology, because Allah says in the Quran that this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made enemies for the prophets, the shayateen, from man and from jinn, and they reveal to each other. They have revelation to each other, and they beautify that revelation for one another. So the Shaykh said that this is a philosophy, this is a theory, this is a way of thinking which is supported or in order to support Iblis.
ما هي قوة الطبيعة؟ نحن كما سألناه عرف لنا الماء وعرف لنا الصدفة، نقول عرف لنا الطبيعة. القوة عرفناها، والقوة أنواع وأشكال، أليس كذلك؟ طيب ما هي الطبيعة؟ عرف لنا الطبيعة. يا من تقول قوة الطبيعة، ما هي الطبيعة؟ يقول لك الطبيعة كل ما هو موجود فهو طبيعة. طيب تعال يا حبيبي خلينا نشوف معاك وندرس الطبيعة هذه. الطبيعة فيها أشياء جميلة، نعم، النباتات، الإنسان، الحيوان، يعني أشياء كثيرة طيبة جميلة. لكن السؤال الذي يبادر للذهن، أنا طبيعة، والأشجار طبيعة، والشمس طبيعة، والقمر طبيعة. من الذي خلق من؟ هل الشمس خلقتني وأنا خلقت القمر، والقمر خلق الأرض، والأرض خلقت الشجر؟ من خلق من؟ الجواب غير معروف، يعني شيء مجهول. وهل المجهول يأتي بمعلومة؟ ما يأتي بمعلومة. إذن هذا كل كلام فلسفة شيطانية لا حقيقة لها. وعلى افتراض أن الطبيعة هذه خلقت الوجود، فهي التي خلقت، وهي في نفس الوقت مخلوقة. وعلى فرض أن هذا كلام يعني مطروح للنقاش، هذه طبيعة مجنونة. كيف مجنونة؟ هي تنبت الشجر وتحرق الشجر. ما سمعتم حرائق أستراليا؟ ما سمعتم حرائق إسبانيا؟ ما سمعتم حرائق كاليفورنيا؟ طيب ما جت الحرائق هذه؟ قالوا من الصواعق في السماء. طبيعة، قوة طبيعة، صاعقة، قوة طبيعة، والشجر قوة طبيعة. طيب كيف الطبيعة تنمي نفسها وتحرق نفسها؟ هل هذا معقول؟ هل هذا التصرف عاقل؟ لا، ليس عاقل. لو رأينا إنسان قام وحرق نفسه، هل هذا الإنسان سليم التفكير والنفسية ولا لا؟ إما عنده مسكين، عنده مشكلة نفسية أو خلل في عقله، لا يمكن أن يكون إنسان سليم. إذن هذا تصرف غير عاقل. كيف هذه الطبيعة التي فيها تصرفات غير عاقلة صنعت مخلوقا عاقلا مثل الإنسان؟ هل يمكن هذا؟ لا يمكن. إذن هذا كلام مأخوذ خيره، يعني ما نفاده، كلام باطل لا حقيقة له. فتقول تعال يا حبيبي، أنت تقول قوة الطبيعة، والآن لما عرفنا أن الطبيعة لا يمكن أن تخلق بنفسها شيئا، لماذا ما ترفع كلمة طبيعة وتقول قوة الله، قوة الخالق؟ في مشكلة؟ يقول لا أنا ما أؤمن بالله. طيب أنت ما تؤمن بالله، لماذا لا تؤمن بالله؟ أنت قبل ما أطف عليك ترجم.
Assalamu alaikum. The Shaykh said, now, as we looked at blind coincidence, we are asking the same question to those people who believe in Mother Nature. We're calling it Mother Nature. In Arabic, the Shaykh is using the strength of nature. But the same thing is we're asking, what is the definition? We looked at coincidence, give us a definition. Again, we are asking the definition for strength and nature, or mother and nature. Mother we know, strength we know, but what is nature? So the Shaykh said that a possible answer that they will give is nature is everything that exists, everything that has come into existence. So the Shaykh said that we can understand things that come into existence. We can look around, we can see the good things, we can see the bad things. There are nice things, there are plants, there are trees, there's humans, etc. But the question that we need to ask in response to the question or the answer that you've given is, if we are all nature, humans are nature, the sun is nature, the moon, the plants, everything is nature, then who created who? Did the sun create me, and then I created the moon, and then the moon created the earth, and then the earth created the plants? Who created who? What is the order? So the answer that those people who believe, or I think they call them naturalists, they will say, we do not know. This is something from the unknown. We do not know. So now the Shaykh is asking another question to show the falsehoodness of this. If something is unknown, can it give you an answer? If something is unknown, can it give you an answer? Can it give you a theory? Can it give you a belief? The answer is obviously no. There is no reality to that. Therefore, it can only be something which has come from shaitan. But the Shaykh goes on also to give another argument to this. Let's say for argument's sake, nature created us. And we've all come about coincidentally because of nature. Then we will say that this nature itself created itself. But this is even more disturbing. The reason why is because now if we're saying Mother Nature or the strength of nature created everything and we've all come about by coincidence, then this nature is actually something which is very dangerous and doesn't have any sense behind it. Because it creates itself and then it kills itself. The Shaykh gives examples. Don't we see tsunamis? Don't we see rainforest fires? Don't we see all these different... It creates itself, something nice and beautiful, something which is going to benefit the rest of the creation, but then it kills itself, all of a sudden. How is that? Something which is perfect, that it created itself, and then it kills itself. But the Shaykh goes on even further. This doesn't have any intelligence or sense or any kind of intellect behind it. But the Shaykh goes on even further. Now he's giving an example, before we go on to the next point. The Shaykh gives an example. Imagine you've got a person, human being, and he stands up one day and he kills himself. He kills himself. There's only one or two options. Either he's got a mental problem himself, or he's got problems in his head, or something's happened to him, and he, as a result, has committed suicide. Either way, that person is not upright. Therefore, if we were to say that Mother Nature created us, or the strength of nature created us, it is not an upright belief. But the Shaykh goes now even further to show us the falsehoodness of this, that is not something which is within the sense of reality. It's not something that we can understand, that we've come about from coincidence and that Mother Nature's created us. The Shaykh is saying here, if you've got something which is unknown, if you've got something which is dangerous that kills itself, how is it that it's created humans who are upright and intelligible and intelligent and knowledgeable and have upright senses and order in their life? How is it possible that something which doesn't have any sense has created something which has sense? The Shaykh is saying here that those people who believe in that will be asked then, why can't you just say that Allah is the one who created everything? And if you're going to say the strength of nature, just say the strength of Allah, the strength of Al-Khaliq, because you know that nature didn't create itself. But then they might say, I don't believe in Allah, and the Shaykh is now going to continue from there.
أنت لا تؤمن بوجود الله. لماذا لا تؤمن بوجود الله؟ فيقول لأنني لا أؤمن إلا بالشيء الموجود المحسوس، شيء أمسكه بيدي أو شمه في أنفي أو أذوقه بلساني أو أراه بعيني أو أسمعه بأذني. لكن هذا كله ما حدث مع الخالق أو الله الذي أنت تقول أنه خلقنا.
So the Shaykh is saying that they will say, that those people who believe in nature, they will say, I don't believe in Allah. So we will ask them, why don't you believe in one creator? Why don't you believe in Allah? So the answer that they will probably give is that they will say, we have not seen or sensed Allah. We've not observed Him, we cannot see Him, we cannot hear Him, we cannot taste Him, we cannot smell Him. We can only believe in things that we can see or sense. And because Allah is not sensed, we cannot believe in Him.
قل له وهل كل ما غاب عن حواسك ليس موجود؟ سؤال. فيقول يعني ماذا تعني؟ نقول له الإنسان ما زال يكتشف بعض الأمور في الطبيعة، في المخلوقات، في الكون، ما زال يكتشف. هل هذه الأشياء التي اكتشفها الإنسان قبل أن يكتشفها كانت موجودة أم كانت غير موجودة؟ فيقول لا، لابد أنها كانت موجودة، لأنه كيف يكتشفها وغير موجودة؟ نقول له يعني بمعنى أنه ليس كل ما غاب عن حواسك غير موجود، هو موجود، لكن أنت قدراتك وعلمك وتكنولوجيتك لم تسع أن تصل إلى هذا الأمر، لكن هذا الأمر موجود بدليل أنك اكتشفته بعد مدة.
The Shaykh is saying here now, just because something is not sensed, just because you don't sense something, you can't see something, you can't hear something, does that mean that thing does not exist? So they will ask you, probably they will ask you, what do you mean by that? So the Shaykh gives an example. We as human beings, mankind, are continuously researching and seeking and exploring things outside of the things that we can see. We are continuously researching. So now the question we are asking is, whilst we are still searching, if we explore something which is new, does that mean that that thing that we have just come across, something new, has come about now, or has it already been in existence from before? So the person will have to say, yes, it was already existing, we just didn't know about it. But now the Shaykh is saying, now according to what you are saying about Allah, you are saying that that thing that we've just explored now didn't exist until we found out. Or is it better for us to say that it does exist, but we don't have the knowledge of it, and we don't have the capability of seeing it, or we've not got that far yet?
سؤال آخر نقول له طبعا اكتشافات كثيرة ما اكتشفها الإنسان في أشياء حتى الآن، فنقول له هل الإنسان اكتشف كل شيء؟ إذن ما زال علم الإنسان قاصرا عن كثير من المعلومات، فكيف هو يريد أن يعرف ويصل إلى الخالق وهو لم يعرف كل شيء حتى الآن؟
Shaykh is asking another question now as a follow-up question. Has man found everything? Has man got knowledge to everything that exists? And that's a rhetorical question, because even they themselves will say, we don't know everything. We don't have knowledge to everything. So the Shaykh is saying, if we don't understand the creation, how is it that we are going to know everything and be able to get to the level of knowledge where we can see and have senses, use our senses to see Allah?
إذن ما زال الإنسان ليس باستطاعته أن يحيط بكل الوجود، وهذا يدل على قصر وضعف في قدراته العلمية والبحثية. صح ولا لا؟ صح، كلام صحيح. طيب نأتي للقضية المهمة. ما هو؟ قال لو أن رجلا أرسل لك رسالة من نيويورك على تليفونك قال لك أنا فلان الفلاني وأعيش في المنطقة الفلانية، ولا من هذا؟ أنا لا أعرفه، لكن دعني أتحقق من وجوده. أتصل في إيه؟ أتصل في صديق لي في نيويورك ويعرف المنستر الحكومة أو المباحث فأقول له عندنا واحد اتصل أرسل لي رسالة وقال أنا فلان الفلاني وموجود في مدينة نيويورك وهذا عنواني وهذا تليفوني، أرجو الاتصال بي. نقول هل هذا الإنسان صحيح موجود أو غير موجود؟ هو أرسل رسالة فنتحقق. فيتصل ذاك ويتحقق قال نعم هذا رجل معروف عندنا يسكن في كذا ويدرس في جامعة كذا وعنده أصدقاء كذا كذا. خلاص. هل هذا يعطيك إيمان بأن هذا الشخص موجود ولا غير موجود؟ موجود. خلاص تحققت في علاقة مع واحد تعرفه. جيد. جيد. طيب الله سبحانه وتعالى أرسل رسلا وأنزل كتبا يخبرك بوجوده ويثبت لك في كتبه وعن طريق رسله أنه موجود وأنه خلقك. فماذا يكون موقفك؟ هل تقول ليس موجود؟ هذا غباء. This is foolish thinking. لأنك أنت تنفي شيء ثبت وجوده وإن لم يكن بحواسك الخمسة التي هي قاصرة في حد ذاتها ولا تستطيع أن تكتشف كل شيء.
The Shaykh is saying now, just because we don't have the ability to sense something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, because we are not able to sense or see or fully comprehend all of creation. That is because man's ability to sense and to have knowledge of and to research and to find out things about and to discover is limited. So now the Shaykh is saying, this leads to our next point, which is very important. And the Shaykh gives an example. If a man receives a message from somebody from New York on his mobile phone, and he is describing himself, he's introducing himself, my name is, I live in such a location, etc. You don't know this person, you have never been in contact with this person, so your immediate response would probably be, let me find out what this person is saying, and if he is correct in what he is saying, let me do a validation check. So then you probably would get in touch with somebody probably that you know there and do a validation check, and once the validation check goes through, you will then have certainty that this person has actually spoken the truth. Now the Shaykh says, when you go through that process, does that now increase your belief in something that you have not sensed? You've not sensed this man, but you've gone through the process of checking. And when the check goes through, you realize, yes, this man is actually speaking the truth. Does your iman, the Shaykh is saying, but does your belief in that thing, does your credibility in that thing increase? Does that thing actually become believable? That man who's saying who he says he is, even though you've not sensed him, he actually exists. We all know the answer to that. Again, it's very rhetorical. And the point behind that is the Shaykh is saying Allah exists, and He has sent to us books and messengers who have told us that He exists. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us through those validation processes that He exists and that He is the one that has created us. So that leaves nothing except to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our creator. What is the stance after that? Except you agree, or there is only foolishness, like the Shaykh said. It will only be foolishness for a person to negate that Allah exists because he has not sensed Him. This is because we cannot fully understand the whole of creation because our senses and our intelligence is limited.
طبعا سيظهرون سؤال كذلك من شر الشياطين. يقول هناك في علم المنطق والفلسفة طبعا البشرية أن لكل فعل فاعل ولكل مخلوق خالق. فيقول لك إذا كان الله خلقنا فمن خلق الله؟ سؤال شيطاني. نقول هذه الفلسفة الشيطانية نرد عليك بها بفلسفة عقلانية منطقية. نقول ما هي؟ نقول له إذا كان إنسان مثل مستر بنز الذي صنع أول موتور للسيارة، تعرفون مرسيدس بنز؟ بنز هو صانع الآلة، ومستر مرسيدس هو صاحب الشركة الذي مول صناعة السيارة. فنقول لهذا الإنسان مستر بنز أول من اخترع هذه الماكينة موتور for the car. طيب من كان قبله صنع السيارة؟ ما الجواب؟ الجواب المنطقي والواقعي والعقلاني لا أحد، ليس هناك أحد سبق مستر بنز، لأنه أول واحد صنع موتور السيارة. نقول له يا حبيبي بنفس المنطق العقلاني السليم، الله هو أول موجود في الوجود، فقال عز وجل هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن وهو بكل شيء عليم. فإذا ليس هناك شيء ولا أحد قبل الله، كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان الله ولم يكن معه شيء.
The Shaykh is saying now here there is another theory and another kind of philosophy that people have, and again this is from Shaitan. The Shaykh is saying that we all agree that every action needs to have somebody to carry out that action. Every action needs to have a doer, and every created entity needs to have a creator. We agree with that. Nothing created comes about except that it has a creator, and every action has to have somebody that does the action. So now, based on that, who created Allah? This is the question, this is the philosophy, and this is the theory that such people come out with. And the Shaykh said that this is from the philosophy and the theories of Shaitan, because it defies intellect and it defies common sense. And the Shaykh gives us a very practical example of that. He said that the company Mercedes-Benz was made up by two different individuals. One was called Mercedes and one was called Benz. هكذا شيخ؟ ما عرفت هذا. So Mercedes, he had the money, and Benz, he was the inventor. So Mercedes, he put in the money to make the manufacturing, and Benz was the guy who was the inventor to create the engines, etc. And they made the first Mercedes-Benz car, and they made the first car in that manner, the Shaykh is saying. Now the question is, before Mercedes and Benz created the cars, who created cars before them? This is a very common sense kind of question. It is in line with reality, it is in line with our intellect. The answer is no one, because they are the first ones who created the car. By the same idea and the same token, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. And He has always existed. Allah says in the Quran, He is the first, and He is the last, and He is the apparent, and He is the hidden. And the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah existed whilst nobody existed alongside of Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, Allah exists and there is nothing before Him. So the fact that He exists doesn't mean that something has to exist before Him.
نحن الآن في مقدمة ما انتهينا، لكن سأنهي لكم البقية، لأن هذا أهم قضية، أن يكون عندك يقين بوجود خالق لك أوجدك من العدم وسوف يميتك وسيحييك وسيحاسبك ويجازيك وقد يعاقبك. هذا أمر ضروري يكون عندك يقين في هذا الأمر.
So the Shaykh is saying this is all just been an introduction to this topic. It's only just a scratch of the surface. But the Shaykh is saying that this is all very important because it increases in our yaqeen and our certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is our creator. He created us from nothing, and He will cause us to die, and then He will question us, and then He will reckon us for our actions. And all of this is a matter of absolute certainty. It is fact, and it is going to happen.
نأتي إلى قضية الحياة الطيبة. من يعطيك الحياة الطيبة؟ رأيك أم رأيي أم تشارلز داروين أم أفلاطون أم سقراط أم من سيعطيك الحياة الطيبة؟ الجواب: من خلقني هو الذي يعرف نظامي ويعرف خلقي، فهو الذي he will give me the catalog for good life. هو الذي سيكتب لك ايش؟ يكتب لك خريطة حياة الطيبة. فالله سبحانه وتعالى يقول في كتابه الكريم: من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة في هذه الدنيا ولنجزينهم أجرهم يعني في يوم القيامة بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون. آية عجيبة هذه لو تدبرها صحيح. هنا في حياة وهناك في حياة بعد الموت. طيب، قال: إذا أنت أعملت أمر الله وسرت على ما أرشدك في الحياة الطيبة في الدنيا ستنال جزءا مهما، ستنال في حياتك الدنيا حياة طيبة، وفي الآخرة ستنال الحياة الأطيب والأمثل والأنعم والتي لا نهاية لها.
So the Shaykh is saying now, we're talking about good life. So the question is, who is the one that can give us a good life? Is it our intellect? Is it my intellect? Is it your intellect? Is it my opinion, your opinion? Is it Darwin? Is it the people who believe in nature? Is it Socrates? Who is it? And the Shaykh said the answer can only be, after establishing all of what we've talked about, can only be the one who created us. Because he is the one who created us, and he is the one who gave us order. He is the one who gave us, like the Shaykh said, a catalogue of the way that we can live our life. He is the one who has given us a map. And this is what Allah says in the Quran, in the ayah, which is the title of the topic: whoever does good deeds, and he is male and female, and he believes in Allah, then Allah will give them a good life in the life of this world, and Allah will recompense them with the best of what they used to do in the akhirah. And the Shaykh said this is a very powerful and amazing ayah if we were to contemplate and think about it in depth. What this ayah means that there is a life here, and after you finish from here, you're going to move somewhere else. And this is factual based on everything that we've just talked about. So that based on that, if we know that, what we realize now is that what you do in this dunya now, if you follow the law and the order of the one who created you, you will have a good life here. And remember, the Shaykh said in the beginning, good life referring to tranquility and comfort and ease. And if something bad happens to you, you're able to find a solution. And when you go back to Allah in the akhirah, you will find something which is better and even more joyous with Him. Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
أنا أقف هنا. تفسير الآية ممكن الشيخ يفسر لكم الآية أو أي واحد من الأخوة يفسر الآية. طبعا تفسيرها ليس سهل وليس بالبساطة اللي نظن فيها، إن فيها شرح كبير وتفصيل كبير، لكن نقول هذا مجاله عند المشايخ، يمكن من هو أعلم مني في التفسير وقوة التفسير، لكن أنا أهم شيء القضية الأولى التشكيك في وجود الخالق سبحانه وتعالى وأنه خالقنا. هذه أهم معلومة يجب أن تعرف أنها باطلة وأنها من أوهام وخيالات شياطين الإنس والجن. وجزاكم الله خير.
شكرا الله لكم. جزاك الله خير شيخنا. الله يبارك فيكم. الله استفدنا كثير. جزاك الله. The Shaykh ended by saying that this is not a tafsir of the ayah, and he said that perhaps we can look at that on another occasion. But he's saying that the point of this lecture is that we wanted to actually focus on the main, or the first part, which is the people who are trying to confuse us in our belief. The first part of the ayah, who are trying to bring about those doubts. If you can make that solidified, then the rest of the ayah will be clear for us. So we thank Allah, and then we thank our Shaykh for giving us this very beneficial lecture. I'm sure everyone has benefited. And we ask Allah to reward him very well. And inshallah, hopefully we'll see him again.
وسامحونا إن شاء الله نزوركم مرة أخرى. سامحونا عندنا موعد مع أخوة آخرين فنسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يوفقنا وإياكم لما يحبه ويرضاه وأن يعيننا وإياكم على ذكره وشكره وحسن عبادته. جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم.
The Shaykh excuses himself from questions. He's got another appointment. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. بارك الله فيك. جزاك الله خير. شرفنا وبارك فيك. الله يحفظك.